Hi, this is Sally Morgan, physical therapist, craniosacral therapist, and Tellington T-Touch practitioner for animals and people. And this is Tristan. He's a Corgi, and we're here for an episode of Conversations with a Corgi. And today we're going to continue our discussion of fascia, and we're going to look at one of the things that you can do to relieve fascial restrictions. And why is fascia important to us with our dogs? Of course, if you have a performance dog who does agility or showing or even nose work or any kind of obedience work, rally work, you need a dog to be at his maximum function. And so it really is important that his fascia be free and able to move. And he can get fascial restrictions from things like surgery, spaying and neutering, having puppies, injuries. With the dog doing high performance work like agility, they can have a sprain or a strain that doesn't quite heal and they seem fine for 6 months, and then you go to a show in an outdoor type facility in the winter and suddenly that injury resurfaces. Excuse me, because of the fascial restrictions. I feel like I ate a cup of dog hair before I sat down here, and it wasn't even your fault, Tris. Anyway, so fascial restrictions are really important in our life with animals, and particularly with horses. You know, we're riding them. They're very active animals. A lot of dogs are more sedentary, but when you're sitting on a horse and riding him around and asking him to jump and do dressage and do reining and things like that, you really need your horse to be functioning maximally. So what can you do to help your dog or your horse or your cat with a fascial restriction? First of all, you can give them tons of water. Water, water, water. Fascia loves water. Chronic dehydration creates rigid, stiff fascia. And that is one of the things that we consider to be aging, when our fascia is rigid and we can't bend and straighten like we used to. So to prevent that, keep your animals hydrated. And how do you do that? Look closely at why you're feeding kibble. Kibble can really dehydrate your dog, and over a long period of time, you can end up with not only kidney and liver and digestive and urinary problems, but you can also create fascial problems in your dog by long-term feeding of kibble. If you do have to feed kibble because you have a large dog, certainly get a high-quality one, supplement it with either fish oil or coconut oil, and make sure that kibble is floating in water, deep water, when you give it to your dog. That is one of the ways to maintain optimum function for a long time. And I think for a lot of pet owners, there's nothing more painful than watching your senior dog struggle to get up and lay down because of arthritis. And one of the things you can do to prevent or minimize the effects of arthritis is to keep the fascia healthy, and that is through hydration and the use of appropriate oils as well. A lot of vets are recommending feeding sardines at least once a week. There are many minerals and nutrients in sardines, including oils. They're pretty stinky. I would not give my small, less than 20-pound dog a whole tin of sardines, but a couple once a week is a good idea for many pet owners. And lots of people, especially in colder climates, have been doing this for years. It's just common sense that you need oil in your diet when you live in a cold place. So back to fascia. Today, we're going to look at the idea of correcting fascia with craniosacral therapy. Now, craniosacral therapy is something I have done for 30 years now, almost. More than that, probably. And it is a really important part of maintaining health and function in your pets or your horses, or yourself for that matter. The only issue is that there aren't that many people trained to do craniosacral therapy with animals. Now, the techniques I'm going to talk about today, well, I'm not going to talk about specific techniques, but the things that we're looking at with fascia, a person who's trained in human craniosacral therapy can safely do with an animal. And these are something we call the diaphragm releases. And again, cranial work will be addressing those busy intersections where the cars smash into each other because everything is shifting direction, and there's a tendency, because those are busier areas, like your joints in your body, to have more accidents in those areas. And craniosacral therapies, a couple of techniques, can really, really help alleviate fascial restrictions in you, your horse, your dog, and your cat. So what is craniosacral therapy? It is a very gentle method of evaluating and treating restrictions in the craniosacral system and therefore throughout the body. So the craniosacral system is in fact the central nervous system. It includes the brain and the spinal cord, the bones in the head, all the membranes that surround, protect, and support the brain. That should sound familiar because we've talked about fascia surrounding, protecting, and supporting the tissues of the body. And then all those nerves that come off of the spinal cord, and then the bone at the end of your spine, which is your sacrum. And craniosacral therapy can therefore reach your entire body by addressing the central nervous system. Feldenkrais work, similarly, and also Tellington T-Touch, address the central nervous system, not the muscular system. And it's a profound way to make big changes throughout the body. And part of what happens in craniosacral therapy is that the practitioner uses a very light touch. And this is true in a lot of other modalities as well, including Feldenkrais, where you are just using really the weight of a nickel, 5 grams, to affect change in the tissues. And we talked with fascia about that idea of using a light force over a long period of time to affect change. So this is a piece of silly putty. From my angle, it looks like a tongue. And I'm just stretching it very lightly and holding it for a while, and you can see that it's stretching and stretching and stretching. It's very sticky. And when I let go, it maintains that new, longer position. Now, if I use, as someone would with like chiropractic technique, a quick force in a short duration, I break the silly putty. And that is the danger of some of those techniques that use a quick force and a short duration, a big force, because you can really have some injury to the tissues. Now, this doesn't happen with every chiropractic manipulation, and certainly not with every chiropractor you go to. And I use chiropractic work. Chiropractic was originally meant to address bony restrictions over the nerves in the spine. So craniosacral therapy is an excellent modality to use in conjunction with chiropractic or veterinary orthopedic manipulation because it does address the tissues around those nerves that may have been a little, it's not even irritated, they've just been shifted a little by a bony adjustment around them. And so craniosacral therapy can do that gentle, light, long pull to realign the fibers in the fascia after you've had a chiropractic manipulation. And in fact, the ideal circumstance is if you, I try to get out of the sunshine here a little bit, if you do some soft tissue work, then the manipulations, and then more soft tissue work, because then you're releasing the tissue tension that's holding that dysfunction and then adjusting the bony structure under that, and then again releasing the tissues around that. So that is a really good way to relieve fascial tension throughout the body. And again, craniosacral therapy can really affect the imbalances in sensory, motor, and neurologic conditions. That's for after a stroke or a dog with a herniated disc, or I see a lot of cats actually that have had strokes, or a horse that's had a spinal cord injury from jumping or reining, or just a slip in the pasture, or a leggy dog slipping on the ice. Any number of things can create a restriction that can be addressed with craniosacral therapy. And one of the hallmarks of a lot of these techniques, these holistic techniques, is that they engage the body's self-healing mechanism. And again, when you use a quick force or a heavy force, way more than the weight of a nickel, you are engaging the body's self-defense mechanisms. And some of you may have had an injury somewhere and you're afraid to let somebody touch it because they may have a deeper, heavier touch and you don't want them to hurt you. So if someone goes in with a very light touch, you relax, you trust them, and they can actually help you a lot more than somebody who may be very knowledgeable but is going in with a heavier touch. So one of the hallmarks of the fascial work of craniosacral therapy and some of the other techniques we'll talk about is that they are fairly light. They're that little force over a long period of time to make the silly putty stretch but not break it. And that is part of engaging the body's self-healing mechanisms, because then the body can continue to hydrate that area, do fluid exchange there, carry out the cellular byproducts and bring in nutrition to the cells and really change the metabolism of that whole area where the restriction had been. And remember, those restrictions can be seen as like accidents in busy intersections, or also that idea of gum in your hair. You want to realign the fibers in a new position. So if I look again at the silly putty here, and I mash it up and make it into like a bundle where it's going in every direction, and then I put that slow, sustained force on it, very light, you can see the silly putty is stretching and the fibers are elongating. See how it's all lengthened there? So that is how craniosacral therapy can address some of these fascial restrictions. And again, in cranial work, we talk about the diaphragm releases, and the diaphragms are at different parts of your body where the vertical and horizontal fascia come together. So that's going to be over the sacrum and the lower half of the body, and then further up over the junction between the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae, and then further up between the thoracic and cervical vertebrae, and then again up between the cervical vertebrae and the occiput, the top of the head, the back of the skull. So those are the areas of the body that you can address fascial restrictions using craniosacral therapy. And as I mentioned before, there are over 250,000 people that have been trained in Upledger Craniosacral Therapy 1, and any of those people can do a diaphragm release on a dog or a cat or a horse. Of course, if they're going to work on a horse, it's really best if they have some horse experience. Oh, it's so sunny this morning, so that they are safer working with a horse, because animals can shake and kick and turn their heads and nip at you a little bit when you're releasing areas that might have been really tight. So it's really important that the person have some familiarity with animals, but the technique is the same. It's the one I showed you earlier with the squishy toy, where you just take up the slack in the tissues and follow it in the direction it goes. And it certainly feels different to do that on a person than a cat or a horse or a dog or a rabbit, but a really experienced practitioner can often give you a lot of help with your dog, especially for issues in these areas where the spinal junctions are, where they shift from lumbar to thoracic to cervical and to the skull. And of course, different breeds of horses and dogs have more lumbar vertebrae. They all have more lumbar vertebrae than we do. And so it's, you know, your hand is big. This is a little dog. I'm covering so many vertebrae here. I'm on his sacrum and nearly all of his lumbar vertebrae with just my hand here. So although it is an exact science, if you are desperate and you are in the middle of Wyoming and you can only find one craniosacral person who works with humans, that person can offer a lot of assistance for your horse or your dog as well, if they are, again, familiar with that type of animal and their responses. So that's one way that you can alleviate some of the fascial restrictions in the body. And we'll continue our look at some of the other modalities that you can use to relieve fascial restrictions as we continue on next week. Probably we will definitely talk about myofascial release and massage. And if there's anything that you guys use or know about that you want to know if it addresses the fascia, please let me know. We're also going to look at myotherapy, which is also called trigger point therapy. And let me think of some other ones where people would go, some different types of massage. Some people, shiatsu can address some of the fascial restrictions in the body. There are many, many, many modalities to address fascial restrictions. But the important thing is to find someone who is familiar with working with animals. And even acupuncture can be a great modality to work with fascial restrictions. And we'll talk about that as to, I have to make a little note of that, acu, because I had some really interesting experiences doing body work that I do while an animal was receiving acupuncture, and it was pretty fascinating how the tissue was releasing, so we'll talk about that. So thanks for joining us today. It's Easter soon. You can buy some silly putty and practice your fascial releases. Tristan's afraid I'm going to drop the putty on him. He's so hairy. If I got the putty on him, it would like never work again. Right, Tris? See, it's just an egg. And I have here 2 balls of silly putty. So if you are going to play with this, you might want to get 2 balls because it is a lot easier than with 1, because when you do that low grade pressure over a long period of time with 1 ball of silly putty, it stretches so thin that you think it's going to break. So having 2 putties can actually be a little bit of a better illustration for you. So thanks for joining us today, and give your pets lots of water. Bone broth is great, and also keep them giving them oils such as sardines and fish oil, good quality fish oil, and coconut oil. I use organic coconut oil in Tristan's food once a day, and it's made a huge difference in him. And all the oils can really enhance the function of the nervous system as well. Nerves love some of these oils, as well as the gut. So consider your food as one of your lines of defense to keep your dog's fascia happy and healthy, or your horses. Horses, we often add different oils to their grain. We used to use corn oil. I wouldn't use that anymore because it is so genetically modified and it does create inflammation. There are other oils available now that people use that are much better, and there's even some formulations specifically for supplementing your horse. So thanks for joining us today. Tristan, are you balancing better today? He says, I don't know. I feel pretty nervous all the way around here. Sorry about the sun. At this hour of the day, it's very sunny in the dining room. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.